On episode 63 of BRC and Friends and the final installment for Filipino American History Month 2023, I chat with Megan Reyes, journalist, podcaster, and content creator. Recently honored by #sports as a creator of color, we not only talked about Megan's entry into sports broadcasting, but we'll talk about growing up in Idaho, women's soccer, specifically the women's Philippines national team, and of course, that question and dilemma about being Filipino enough. We had a great time talking, and I, for one, cannot wait to see what is ahead for Megan. Take a listen, and you'll see why. Thanks for being here. Grab a beverage, pull up a chair, and enjoy listening to my conversation with Megan Reyes. My name is Bruce Reyes-Chow, and this is BRC and Friends. Each episode, my co-host and I chat with activists, artists, academics, and adventurers to discuss politics, faith, pop culture, technology, and as you will discover, pretty much everything that pops into our heads. This is basically an excuse for us to hang out with friends and colleagues and riff about things that matter. Welcome to BRC and Friends. And welcome to BRC and Friends. I'm very excited. Our final episode for Filipino American History Month, though really this could be any month. We have Megan Reyes on today, who I have seen the name and watched, and then all of a sudden, my wife and I are big women's soccer people. I said, wait a minute. We were at the Oakland Soul game, and we're like, I think that person is the same Megan Reyes. And then we went to the World Cup, and we're looking at podcasts. I'm like, holy Moses. Megan Reyes has a podcast about the Filipino national women's team. And so we'll talk about a lot of things today. But first, let's go ahead and have Megan, if you would go ahead and introduce yourself, tell us where you are, anything interesting, pronouns, all that kind of stuff. Welcome to the show.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me. Yes, my name is Megan. I go by she, her. I'm based in Sacramento. We can talk more about that. Actually, a lot of people don't know that. But I'm based in Sacramento. But I am all over the world. Fortunately, life and career takes me everywhere. But home base, where I lay my head at night when I'm not traveling, is Sac.
That's awesome. So yes, I will say your bio was very hard to find. I actually did a little bit. I was like, where? And then I saw something pop up that says Sacramento, and I was like, because I grew up in Sacramento. I grew up in Sacramento and Stockton, or my hometowns. And we share somewhere back in the Philippines, a Reyes somewhere.
Relative.
Somewhere. Where I'm third generation. My grandfather came over, and he was originally De Los Reyes and he's Ilocano. So I don't know if we're 12 cousins or something. But I grew up in the South Side, like it sounds tough. I grew up in Greenhaven in Sacramento. So where, without, obviously don't give your address away, but whereabouts in Sacramento are you?
I'm in the Natomas area.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yes.
So that's, when I grew up, that was like far away.
It still is kind of far away. It's definitely developed a lot now. That's sort of by design because of the airport is not too far away. And so that's by design why I'm over here. But yeah, it's, I like a lot of people don't know I live here. And so when I tell people, they're like, really? But to be honest, I was in the Bay Area for 10 years. And then once I started working for myself and money comes in different ways than it once did. And the rent I was paying in Oakland it didn't make sense for how much I traveled. So this was the next logical step for me. I think life may take me to LA soon, but with it being a lot more affordable here compared to the Bay Area and for how much I travel, my money goes a lot further here as far as the space I get for rent.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Yeah, we have I still have relatives in Sacramento, Stockton, Elk Grove. For all of you not from California, those are all kind of Northern California areas. But where did you grow up?
Oh, so my story, I love when people ask me, like, where are you from? Like, do you want my whole life story?
Yes, we want the whole thing.
My parents came from the Philippines in 1980. And when they moved to America, they found roots in New Orleans. So that's where my brother was born. He spent the first 10 years of his life there. I was born there also. And when I was a baby, they moved to northern Idaho. My dad got a job there. And my mom loves to tell the story about how it was such a difficult transition. First, the culture shock of moving from the Philippines to the States. New Orleans being a little bit different, right? At least it's a little bit more racially diverse. Mm-hmm. And then moving from New Orleans to northern Idaho, I think was just like miserable for her. I don't think she wanted to stay very long. And now they've been there like 33 years. That's where I grew up. I grew up in northern Idaho. Town called Moscow.
What city?
Moscow.
Okay. I've heard of it.
So I heard of it. I was going to say most people have not heard of it, unfortunately, until the small town tragedy last year with those college students that were killed in their home.
Oh.
That's actually where I'm from. That's my hometown, and that's where I went to college. It's where I graduated from. So now when I tell people I'm from Moscow, they're like, "Oh, I've heard of that. Is that where XYZ happened?" I'm like, "Yeah, unfortunately, no one knew about this place before now, and now it kind of puts into contact."
Right, but it's a university town, right? What is that? What school is it again?
University of Idaho.
It is University of Idaho. Okay. What's the mascot?
And then the Vandals.
Oh, interesting.
Idaho Vandals. And then right next door, about 10 miles away, is Washington State University.
Oh, okay.
So two college towns right there. But yeah, that's where I grew up, and then also where I went to college and graduated. And then when I graduated, I moved to Oregon for a year. And then after Oregon, I moved to the Bay in 2014. So I've been in California now 9 plus years. And so California is home now.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, that's great. So what did you study? How did you get into, I mean, you do a lot of different things. I mean, I love it because I was trying to figure, well, you're a journalist, but you're also a content creator, and you're obviously doing voice work, and you're I mean, I love it. Like, you're doing everything. So how did you get into this space? Like, was this always, were you one of those, we have video of you at 4 performing, or were you like headed somewhere else? And then you're like, I might be good at this over here. Like, how did you get to the space you're in now?
Yeah, I've been in sports, working in sports since college. I figured that out fortunately, when I was a freshman, when I was 19, maybe coming on 19, that I wanted to work in the sports space. And I just got an internship with Idaho's athletic department and loved the game day experience, and didn't realize that you could have careers working in sports. It's just not something I'd ever thought of. Grew up playing my older brother. It was me and him, and so I wanted to do everything like my kuya, and so he was super into sports, so I was super into sports, and I didn't know until, again, college, that that's what I wanted to do. So from college until even after I graduated, it was always a career in sports was what I wanted to do. But what I do now, as far as being on camera and hosting and speaking in public, hell no, never would have wanted to do that. Never. And I love to tell the story, and I joke about how my senior year I was in a sports broadcasting class, and I dropped it after the first day when the professor told us what we needed to do, and how you would think signing up for a sports broadcasting class. And at that point, I wanted to be like Erin Andrews and Sam Steele, her name at the time. And so I knew what it entailed. But then on that first day, when she told us it required, speaking on camera and interviewing people, I was like, oh, hell no. No. I was terrified.
Like, it's called sports broadcast.
And I was like, oh, really? I don't like that. So what I do now, as far as, talking on camera, I never would have wanted to do. And I think it's really special the way I kind of backed into this space. It started in the last few years. And I really think it happened around COVID time. I tell people in an odd way, I think being on Zoom and being forced to speak on camera during a very remote time got me over that fear a little bit. There were times at one of my last full-time jobs where I had to present in front of the entire company. It was like 200 plus people. I was terrified, but it helped a little bit removing that in-person element of the audience watching, where I could just like speak to my camera and ignore like the actual audience window on the side. And as I got a little bit more comfortable doing that, and then I had a podcast come out in 2021 where I got more comfortable interviewing, and my guests would even say, like, you make a really comfortable space for me to talk, and I never opened up about XYZ, where I kind of got like, I might have a knack for this. And so that's sort of how it came about. But I always say, like, if you had told 18-year-old me that I want to do live TV and I get a thrill out of it and I find it so much fun, I'd be like, no, you don't.
That's awesome.
So that's kind of how I came into this space.
Right. Well, I noticed, so you've worked with a lot of teams, so you did college sports, and you're doing professional sports, but let's go back to, so did you play sports? You said you played. What did you play? Let's go back in glory days a little bit. Tell me about Megan the athlete.
Megan the athlete, Megan's athletic career was very short-lived. I stopped playing like traditional sports when I was like 10. I played softball. So my brother was a baseball player. Okay. Played in college, coached, still to this day, coaches my niece's softball team. So I played softball, t-ball, and then I played basketball, but I'm 5'1". So the basketball career was not going to go far. I stopped playing sports when I think I was in 7th grade, and I took dancing very seriously because I was also ballerina, classically trained, wanted to be in New York, dancing for like the ABA from the time I was 7 until I graduated high school. So once I stopped playing traditional sports, it was just full-time ballet for me, which was my own sport. So my traditional athletic career was not a long one. So but I look back on it.
I was like, you weren't like the stereotypical Filipino American player that played midfield basically in soccer.
No, I was gonna say, I wish looking back on it that my parents put me in soccer. My brother didn't play, it's just we didn't play. I mean, it's funny. I hate running. So I would have been a terrible soccer player, but I never got the opportunity to figure out if I was gonna like it or not.
I have 3 children, and our oldest, when they moved from the half field, so this is way back, to the full field, I remember her saying to us, like, I don't think I like running. And we're like, maybe soccer is, I think you're done. It's fine. But yeah, my other 2 were like big soccer players and crazy, all that kind of stuff. But so you were a dancer. Let's talk a little bit about that. So you chose that. How much is that parallel when you see like youth sports? Like it feels like my kids, when they got to 6th grade, they had to choose, right? They put the softball stuff away, broke my heart. I was a baseball player. And I still have, this is terrible podcasting, I still have a softball on my desk because my youngest child stopped pitching. And I'm like, oh. And so, but because they had to choose soccer, right? All their kids were going to club and they were all doing that. And but I assume dance is similar, right? You, at some point, if you're going to you choose, what's been as you're watching sports around youth in particular, what have you seen? What's your take on how youth sports has progressed in the last, decade or 20 years or however long, as you've been watching things go on?
I think my biggest thing with youth sports that I have the strongest opinion on is just the barrier to entry. I was talking to one of my best friends about it because we went to the Sac Republic game together over the weekend. She played through high school and then stopped, and her son plays. And she was just saying how, one, she wished she had taken it more seriously because she thinks she could have gone further than past high school. And 2, how, especially having kids now, just it seems, with the exception of my family and maybe some families, like it's like the one sport when your child's like maybe 4 or 5, like, oh, we'll put them in soccer. And then to your point, they decide if they want to keep playing or not. But it seems like, unfortunately, a lot of the times that decision is made for people. And it's made for people based on just your family and your income. And that's just really my biggest opinion on it, is how very quite early on in a childhood that decision is made, because it's just how expensive it is, especially soccer. Like if you want to be elite, if you want to really take it seriously, you got to do club. And even beyond soccer, like I look at my niece, she plays club softball. She also plays club volleyball, like really any sport, travel basketball, any of it. You have to do, your rec and maybe your school. And then if you really want to compete, you have to do club. And it's just so expensive, and the time and the money. And that's just really my strongest opinion is I think it's awesome at how competitive it's become, but with the level of competition, then it just becomes more expensive.
Yeah. Our kids grew up in San Francisco, and the club per capita for kids is terrible. I mean, it's very money driven. It's my youngest child is in college right now and is writing her dissertation on how youth sports upholds empire, and to look at how it informs the way the U.S. continues to develop, like, and one of the reasons, I think youth sports in the United States is so different than other places, but like how it upholds a particular way of being, and access is a huge part of that. I mean, we noticed teams getting less diverse. It was, and I would say some of the players were like, well, this is money, not skill, right? At a certain level, it's just like, we were told your kid could play in college. We're like, could she? Like, really? And they're like, if you come and pay like this amount of money. Right. So I'm like, that seems like there's, now I will say one of our kids did get recruited and all that kind of stuff. But then like, it was that whole, you buy into this and it's just, it's just wild. Yeah. All right. So you were a dancer, all that kind of stuff. And now you're in. So drop some names. Like, what are you doing in terms of like who you're working for? Not like names of people, but like. So I know that you work with the Soul. You're working with LA. Like, what are you doing now? What are the exciting things going on for you?
Yeah. So some of my work includes social media management and content, and so I very fortunately, so it was like end of 2021. Yeah, December 2021, I started a freelance job with the Olympics with the IOC right before Beijing 2022. And so it was a short-term contract doing social media throughout just the games. Needed help. Being US based, West Coast based also really helps them keep the 24/7 coverage. And very fortunately, I've stayed on contract with them for the last year and a half. So my day job, which I don't think a lot of people realize I do still, is social media work. So I do stuff with the official Olympics pages. I also work for Women in Soccer, if you've heard of them, a nonprofit that really just works to literally what it sounds like, to bring more women in soccer, either playing or working in the sport. And so those are two projects I work on. And then my content creation and my on-camera work, it varies. So I do stuff with EA Sports FC, and then adjacently with Angel City, who I have a lot of love and I will admit bias towards. Like you mentioned, Oakland Soul. I'm working on a project with Sac Republic. The content I like to create is about growing the game, but the way I have a skill in growing the game is telling player stories, because to me, it's like, if you don't know anything about soccer, and as it continues to grow in America, there's a lot of people that they love sports, they watch sports, but maybe they don't watch soccer. They don't understand the game, whatever it may be. But you get to know a player, you fall in love with a player, you like their personality. Just like with any other sport, you're going to watch, you're going to care a little bit more, and then maybe you're going to become a fan. So that's how I like to create content in order to grow the game, is like, especially in soccer, you have people from so many different countries and walks of life and stories, and people that maybe didn't start playing till high school, or maybe they've been playing their whole life. And there's just so many really cool stories to tell, and across the globe, right? Like what I did this summer with the Philippine national team. So that's a lot of the work I do, is just how can we grow the game in a way that is authentic to me, because I didn't play, and I'll be the first to say, like, I can't tell you the game technically. I can't tell you why this one function works and this doesn't, and what they did wrong. I will be the first to be like, that's not my strong suit. When I was hosting shows, I would tell them, like, if we're going to talk about analytics and we're going to break down the game, I will tee up those topics, but that's not what I'm going to sit here and pretend to know how to do. So yeah, like, it varies month to month. It varies during the time of year. Obviously, the last year-ish with both World Cups has been really busy, but especially with 2026 is like far away, but not that far away to get excited for the next Men's World Cup. There's a lot of soccer on my plate, which I love.
It's fun. Our family, we refer to the World Cup and then the Men's World Cup for the women. So, and our every 4 years, so we're big. We only watch women's soccer. That's all we really watch. And so
love that.
Our tradition is every 4 years we all go to the World Cup. So we we went to France 4 years ago, and then we were just in New Zealand and Australia too. And awesome. part of that experience was we buy our tickets. If anybody's listening, pro tip: if you just want to go soccer, buy your tickets before the group stages are set, and then get your housing. So we get our housing and our tickets before anything's set, and we just happened to get New Zealand during group stage, and so we got both Philippines and the U.S. So it was we were awesome. Up like at 1 a.m. in bed watching the draw happen, going, that's us. We got.
That's awesome.
So we got to go, right? So part of our experience though was listening to your podcast, right? So how did you get connected to the Philippines national team? What was that connection? How did you develop that relationship with them?
So the backstory on the podcast started about, I want to say, holidays of last year. And I remember I was driving from Sac to the Bay. I was in traffic. It was really lovely. And I was listening to the podcast Pink Card, ESPN 30 for 30, and they in production with like A Touch More, shout out Meg Rapinoe and Sue Bird. And it was about, for anyone that's not familiar, the story of Iranian women who, are banned from going to football matches, and the stories of the women who would sneak in and go, and how they've been exiled from the country, and, just the politics and the cultural implications, and obviously the football implications. And the very first episode, the host was talking about how she's, first generation Iranian American. She grew up in Reno. She grew up in a very white area. Didn't speak Farsi and kind of felt like a little bit removed from her culture. And in the first episode, she was interviewing someone who got banned, got caught going to a game, was exiled from the country. And since she didn't speak Farsi, her mom was translating for the guests. And I remember thinking, like, that's really kind of cool. Like, I wonder how cool would it be if I had a project where because I don't speak Tagalog. I'm trying to learn, but I don't speak it. I don't understand it really. I can maybe understand like 10 things. And so I was like, what? That'd be so cool if there was a project I could work on where my mom or my dad had to translate Tagalog for me. And I was like, what could that be? And I remember just driving me like, what could that be? Like, what story is there to tell? And then it dawned on me like, wait, the Philippines are going to the World Cup for the first time. Like, there's a story here. And I sat on it for a little bit to figure out what that story could be. I did some research, and then I realized double weight. Half these players are from the U.S.
Yep.
And I was like, triple weight. here's the story. Here's the story here. So I started on it that way. And then I, by chance, if for those that are really tapped into Philippine women's national team, you may know of Venice Furio and her Football Brew podcast. And she followed me by chance. And I was like, wait. Ooh. Quadruple weight, like, hold on, here's like someone I can cover, or I can interview that actually covers the team closely. And had 2 conversations with her, and she was wonderful to speak to. And I said, I'm going to reach out to the national team, and in your opinion, what's the best way to do it? Like, I have no issue reaching out to the players directly, but I don't want to be that American that's going to sidestep the process of going through the team and whatever. I want to be respectful about it. And she said, I'll just give you the media officer's email. I'll give him a heads up that you're reaching out. And then you can go through it that way. And so it was really, because I asked, I was like, I see they have an email in their bio. She's like, oh, no, don't go through there. Like, it's going to get lost in translation. I'll just make sure that I'll give him a heads up, and here's his contact. And so they were very open to the storytelling idea, and he helped set up interviews with some of the players. And then because the world is small and the Bay Area is small, I know Reina Banta's Tita, like we're friends. And so I called her to ask her opinion on the show, Lisa, and I wanted her as a guest, as someone who is Filipino American and who works in soccer and played soccer and all the things. And she's like, I love it. And did you know that Reina's on the team? I was like, no. I did not know Reina was. Yeah, I was like, I did not know Reina was on the team. So it all kind of worked out the way it sounds like it was supposed to, with it just all sort of falling into place perfectly. And yeah, as I started to tell the stories and realize, okay, there's a lot of common denominators here, not just first generation, but second generation. And I had just the best time writing that show and interviewing the players, and then the way that the teams run, kind of came to be. I think a lot of people didn't expect the Philippines to even score, let alone win a game. It was just really cool the way that all turned out. And so I would like to continue the storytelling in some way. Obviously, they're doing Olympic qualifying now, and the team is really starting to shape out. And even beyond that, like, I feel like there's a niche there for me beyond soccer, just with all the Filipino American sports. Because I joke about this, like, I could tell you this person on this NFL team is Filipino, and people be like, oh, I didn't know that. It's like, only Filipinos would know that.
Exactly. And we flex it all the time.
Exactly. Only we would know that because it makes us so proud. So it's like, that's like, there's a lot of cool stories to tell there. And the podcast around the national team, I think, was just like a really cool entry point.
Well, that's awesome. My favorite thing about Reina, I don't know Reina, but we happened to sit behind her dad at one game. And for those of you who don't know, Reina's dad is Rob Bonta, Attorney General of California. No big deal. But he's first and foremost a soccer dad. Like, he's a soccer dad. And I watch his Instagram, and it's hysterical and sweet as can be. It's like, he's still
He's a soccer
flexing
dad.
he's like, it's so funny. I'm just like, dude, you were always a soccer dad forever. And I respect that. I would totally be doing the same thing. Like my kid's still playing like women's adult league. And I'm like, hey, am I watching my kid Saturday morning? She's 24, but we drove an hour.
That is so sweet. Wait, so what matches did you go? Which ones did you go to?
So
in New Zealand?
we went to 11 matches across New Zealand and Australia, and then we also did Australian football and rugby, and got to do some other things.
Cool.
So we went to the very first match New Zealand win, and then and then went to the final. So we did the whole thing.
That's so
but
cool.
we were at the winning when the Philippines beat New Zealand.
Oh.
That was by far my soccer highlight. Other than a couple games my kids played, soccer highlight of my life was watching them.
So
first the goal. And because it was, I had some friends like, well, are people going to show up from the Philippines? I'm like, oh yeah, they are. Like,
are they?
I was like,
yeah.
Oh, we'll be there. Don't worry. And so it was because it was New Zealand's home, and there were so many Filipinos. So it was amazing, just the vibe. And so we got to be that. That was. And we stayed afterwards and just absorbed the whole thing. So we got to see. I think we saw the Philippines play twice. I can't remember exactly, but and then some other things. But so let's talk. This is a good segue. I want to touch into the Filipino American kind of thing on the national team. I have friends in the Philippines. And they know we're big soccer people, so they were saying, hey, there's a little controversy brewing because there were like so many Phil-Ams on it. And then there was like this, how much of that was part of your conversations with them? Like, did folks, I know that there was, just how Filipino Americans adjusted to being in the Philippines, and how did the Philippines receive the Phil-Ams and that whole diaspora that's unique to the Philippines. Talk a little bit about that for the team and how you saw that play out.
Yeah, I have mixed emotions on it. So when I first started writing the podcast, that was like the storyline for me. That was the through line, is the connection to Phil-Ams, because that's the piece I can relate to. I cannot relate to playing soccer. I cannot relate to playing in the World Cup. By no means. I can barely play soccer on a video game. But what I can relate to is being Phil-Am. And so that was my through line. That's what we discussed. The goal was for anyone who's Phil-Am, or just not even, like, you could be of any culture, of any race, ethnicity, if you just maybe never felt connected to your culture, to feel less alone, for it to feel relatable. And so I really honed in on like the American piece of being Filipino American. And then during the World Cup, when I noticed that specifically on the broadcast, that's all they kept talking about.
Yeah.
Was them being from the U.S. Like, oh, this team of 23 U.S. and this U.S.-born team, and headlines being like, the Philippine national team made up of X amount of Americans. Then it kind of started to bother me. And I almost felt, in a way, not to say that like I drove that piece, and I almost felt a little bit of guilt of like, did I drive that story too much? Because then I was like, now we're taking away from the Filipino aspect of it.
Right.
Because regardless of being Phil-Am or from Australia or Canada or wherever, they're representing the Philippines. And instead of talking about that, we keep talking about how essentially, like, and I was seeing all the tweets, which I hated, of like the USB team and the USC team. Like, no, they're the Philippines team. They just happen to be from America. And so it was just really, it was this odd, like, push and pull that I had a really hard time parsing through those feelings during the World Cup, because it was really cool, and I had a piece in telling the story of them being Filipino American and the process into why they started recruiting heavily outside of the Philippines, the history there, and being able to relate to that, being able to relate to them as players. But then at the same time, I didn't like during the actual World Cup about how that's all they talked about. So. And I hated that because I feel like it drove some of that controversy of the fact, like, because a lot of I don't want to say a majority. There was a group of people in the Philippines that didn't like the fact that to them, they're like, well, they're not from here. They're not Filipino. And so that whole, like, are you Filipino or not really became top of mind during the World Cup because I felt like I was having to not argue with people. I almost felt like, was I trying to convince myself?
Mm-hmm.
Like, as I was trying to convince others, was I trying to convince myself that just because you were born in the States and I've never been to the Philippines, I don't speak Tagalog, I like about 5 different types of foods. Like, I'm a very Americanized Filipino. Like, am I less than? And by trying to convince other people that these players are also, am I also trying to convince myself? And so it was just like a really weird experience. I was proud, and it was a very prideful experience to watch the players. But then, it was a really interesting conversation that kept coming up because I'm like, this isn't unique to soccer. There are so many people who represent their country if they have dual citizenship, but it just seemed like really specifically honed in on the Philippines. And I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's not as if other countries don't do this. I mean, that's one. And then there's like this, like the unique relationship that the Philippines and the U.S. have after I mean, colonialism and all those things, right? It does create this weird dynamic that is unique in many ways. I mean, my kids were part of that pipeline and tried out for the national team years ago when they first did it. And then they were like, now as young adults, they're like, yeah, dude, would we have wanted to play on the Philippines national team? And I'm like, oh, you would have wanted to. But, right, they're definitely thinking, like, what does that mean for a bunch of U.S. trained players to go over to the Philippines? And so, I mean, I think they were feeling the same. But at the end of the day, we were super proud because of the Phil-Am kind of thing. I mean, I think that was ultimately what came down here. And, I mean, when you win and do well, everybody's happy. I mean, so.
And I think, too, it's a little bit different, like, especially when you live in places like maybe the Bay where there's so many Filipinos and the soccer culture is rich and like you have 3 people from the Bay Area on the team. Like, it's just, I guess I don't really know how to like put it into words for people that like maybe don't really understand Bay Area culture. But to us, it's like, well, there's Filipinos everywhere. Yeah. We're super proud of anyone from the Bay. Secondly, super proud of anyone who's Filipino. You've got 3 of them on the team. Like, that's super cool, that's where the Phil-Am part is a lot more like prevalent maybe to like, again, people from the Philippines. But I remember asking a couple of the players that I interviewed, like, so, what was that experience like? And I'd love to know, did you feel welcomed? And they were admitted that at first they were hesitant. They weren't sure. But I think that's the people that have gripes about it is like it's always a vocal minority, right?
Sure.
But the people that support the team and are proud welcome them. They were saying, like, they were telling me stories about how they would bring in true Filipino fashion. They'd bring the players food and here's all this like treats and food. And they were like, unfortunately the trainers they'd take it. The trainers would be like, don't eat that. Because obviously you can't eat that. But like it's the thought, right? It's the gesture, but it's always a vocal minority.
Yeah, no, for sure. For sure. Well, this I think is a good segue into what I'm asking everybody during Filipino American History Month. This question that comes up often about an internal question and I think sometimes a proof texting question that we often like, are you Filipino enough? Like what, and you've already touched on that a little bit. I mean, for me, I grew up in a very Filipino family in Stockton. It was like, ground zero in many ways for Filipino immigration. But I always, like, I speak a little Tagalog. Like, I can track when people are talking about me and my family, but I couldn't speak it back. Like,
right.
And I didn't visit the Philippines until I was an adult because I'm 3rd generation. So my grandparents came over. And so, you go into some circles and it's like, ooh, I'm not very Filipino because of X, Y, Z. But yet, what does that even mean? So when I just pose that question, whether it's internal or external, are you Filipino enough? What does that mean? Or how would you respond to somebody? What does that conjure for you, either personally or as you're talking with people about this Filipino enough idea?
I think it's such a cool question. And I wouldn't have had an answer even like 5 months ago because like that was almost the existential piece of when I was writing Between Two Worlds, the podcast, because I was like, I don't feel Filipino. Like it was almost, that's why at the end of the episode, very like on the tail end of the show, I kind of like recircle, or I circle back and I revisit episode 1 where I'm like, this story more than anything about it being about the national team is also about me figuring out my identity. And at first I didn't feel it. And then when I was speaking with Lisa Bontasumi, who is just phenomenal, and also being a licensed therapist, right. I think having that conversation helped. But I remember telling her, I just remember saying, because she works with a lot of Olympians and athletes and people of all walks of life. And so I asked, I was like, if you're working with an athlete who, let's say they're playing on an international stage, the Olympics, World Cup, whatever, and they, are feeling anxious about representing their country or XYZ, like, how do you work through those feelings? And she was breaking it down. And, she said, I would ask, like, what's your relationship to the culture? What's your relationship to the people? What's your relationship to XYZ? And I'm a very literal person. So I took it literally. Okay, now say you're working with me and you asked me that question and I said, I don't have a relationship with the Philippines. I've never been there and I don't speak the language. Then how would you help me break that down? And she really just put my entire life into perspective when she said, you're not less Filipino because you haven't been there.
Right.
And I was like, what?
Wait a minute.
Because I think, exactly. Because all my life, when I would tell people, oh, I've never been to the Philippines, or, oh, I don't understand Tagalog, I don't speak Tagalog, they'd be like, how are you Filipino and not XYZ, blah, blah, blah. And I think over time, I got it in my head, like, because I don't know these things, then I'm just like maybe 30% less Filipino.
Right.
After having that conversation, it really put into perspective, like, regardless if they weren't, but in my vacuum of a life, like, both my parents are from there. My dad's family is still there. I've actually never met my dad's family because I've never visited the Philippines. They spoke Tagalog in the house. They just didn't teach me. I think it's just I grew up a little bit more removed. It sounds like you grew up in a rich Filipino household as far as culture and maybe a lot of family members around, because we were in Idaho.
Yeah, I was going to say you didn't have many.
It was literally just my parents, my brother and I, and maybe there's like 30 something Filipinos in the Moscow Pullman area. So I just didn't have that same type of upbringing where, like, one of my best friends who grew up in Vallejo and she was around all her cousins, all her titos and titas. It was family time every weekend. You could get a little more immersed in the culture. And so to answer the question is, I struggled with that literally up until like 3 months ago about, like, am I Filipino enough or not? Because I similarly, like, around certain family members, they'd be like, oh, you sound so American, or because I don't speak Tagalog. Like, I remember growing up speaking to, like, my Lola and my tita on the phone back in the Philippines, and they would be, like, scared to talk to me because they said I have an accent. I'm like, I don't have an accent, but of course I do to them. Right. And then in certain Filipino circles, because I don't eat XYZ, understand XYZ, my taste in music or whatever, it might be a little bit different. It's like, oh, you're not Filipino enough.
I think that's the hardest part is we do it to ourselves. Like, we have to be an outsider enough in the world. And then, you walk into a Filipino space and everybody's trying to rank where you, like, and we do it, and, like, we're ranking ourselves. Even it's like, oh, well, they're super Filipino because they have these 5 things. But everybody that I've talked to so far, I've interviewed, I think, about 7 people for Filipino American History Month. Everybody across the board said, if you have a drop, if you have it in you somewhere, then you're enough. And that is, and like, that's, and just like, we have to internally believe that, right? We have to be like, yes, I'm enough, and stop the, like, I've walked into space and they're like, well, we're going to speak English now because Bruce is here. I'm like, oh my goodness gracious.
Same. Yeah. Because they know or they'll speak to me in Tagalog and they'll look at me and I'm like, what'd you say? And they're like, okay.
Yeah. Well, I'm married to a white woman, so I've been in other space like, well, Bruce and his beautiful American wife. I'm like, oh my goodness.
You're like, Bruce and his beautiful wife. Remove you don't have to qualify it, right? No, but I'm actually on just last week I downloaded the app Ling. It's basically Duolingo, but they you can learn Tagalog on it.
My youngest is just for her birthday said, can you pay for a Tagalog class? And so she's
so
great
cool.
at languages, so she's doing this online Tagalog class. Because and I've tried, like, I took a Tagalog class at an unnamed university here in San Francisco, and like half the class already spoke. And I'm like, okay, there's like
You're
five of
like,
us in the
okay.
corner. There's five of us in the corner going, yeah, we are not tracking at all. And the professor like kept going. Like, I'm like, yo, they are like first language. Us over here, we're still like translating in our head. This means this. This means
Yeah.
this. I'm like, oh.
Yeah. I know. I'm so mad at my parents for not teaching me. I'm over here at 32 years old counting in Tagalog, trying to get past 7.
I did Pimsleur for a while, and actually, really, I thought Pimsleur, that's like what all the state departments use, and that actually has been pretty good, especially if you travel a lot. Like,
What's it called?
Pimsleur, Pimsleur. Yeah, the state. That's what they give to the state department people, and it's pretty good. I mean, I'm not a sponsor of them at all. They don't, but
Or what you want to be? Those Pimsleur.
yes, I want to be Pimsleur, but this is brought to you by Pimsleur because that would be awesome. Yeah, no, this is brought to me by me and my friends. So this is great. So that, yeah, I mean, I think that is one of those pieces that I think for a lot of Philams, because of our unique space in the world and our relationship with the Philippines. I mean, so do you have plans to go? I mean, I assume that if you had an opportunity to go, you'd be like, yes, please.
I would love to go, and I would love to, especially after my show, after the World Cup. I would love to go in a work capacity.
Sure.
I would like work to take me there, and then I would like to also take time to be a tourist. But I would love to go. I'd love to see where my mom's from, where my dad's from. Again, meet my dad's family. Explore, really just kind of feel in tune with everything. And then I would also love on the work aspect to see, I just think it'd be so cool to go see the impact that the women's national team has had on the soccer community. I think would be really special. I know that futsal is huge there, so I'd love to see what that's like. But it's on my top of my bucket list before I die. Is I have to go.
Let's make that happen. The 10 people that listen to this podcast, if you have any connections to the Philippines, can you? She's like, oh God, why am I on this show if only 10 people listen?
I think it would just be so cool. I mean, maybe like I'll just take myself there, but in whatever capacity I get there, I absolutely want to go.
Well, I'm a fellow gig person. If you can get work to pay for you to get somewhere, and then you get to play while you're there, like that's what we do. Like I have no
exactly.
Like, you're paying for your own insurance. You got to cover all your own stuff in the rest of the world. Get your work to bring you, and then you play. And when you go, like I've been about 5 times now, but only in one particular area. In Cebu, Dumaguete. Let me know. I'll give you all, like my friend, like you got to get locals. The one tip would be get locals to make all your reservations because Americans pay like 4 times more than locals do. So there you go. I have friends. I'm like, we're coming at this time. Can you make my reservations? Like, we got you. And it's, yeah, that's the way to, anyway, there you go.
Okay.
This is also like a travel podcast, apparently. We've shifted.
Brought to you by Expedia.
Exactly. I wish. So let's, we've already been talking for 40 minutes, so we're going to start to wind down. But I ask every guest, I forgot to tell you this before the show. She's like, oh no, what are you going to ask me now? What's your social security number and your credit card? No. So I ask every guest, what are you listening to? What are you watching? And what are you reading? Any or all of those. And it could be, I'll talk a little bit so you can think. It could be anything from brain candy to deep stuff. Like I've had academics. I've had people that started speaking Klingon to me in the middle of it. So, you could, I'm judging by your look on your face, you're not going to speak Klingon to me any minute. Though if you did, that would make my day. So what are you listening to? What are you reading? What are you watching these days?
I will admit I haven't read in a while. And I love books. But in the last few years, I think my attention span has not allowed me to read. So I haven't read. I read my phone. So there's that. Haven't also listened to much like as far as shows lately, but I will say my favorite thing to listen to lately has been like old, like 2000s R&B. So that's what's in the car. Watching, I do watch quite a lot of TV. All and
please tell me I'm going to hear some trash. Tell me I'm going to hear some trash TV.
No,
Oh.
I can't. I'm not a big
What?
trash TV person. No.
Okay, fine.
I used
Let's go
to.
deep.
But I've been traveling a lot, so I haven't been able to watch much TV lately. The last thing I probably binged was the new season of Top Boy. I'm a big Top Boy fan. Big Top Boy fan.
I've never heard of. Why haven't I ever heard? Now I feel like I'm either old or not connected. Tell me about this.
It's on Netflix. It's a British-based show. It's like the drug scene in London. It started. The show's been around for a while. I don't quote me on this, and whoever's listening is gonna be like, she's wrong. I want to say it was like BBC or some UK-based channel started the show, and then they canceled it after 2 seasons, and then Drake and Netflix picked it back up, and they revived it for 3 more seasons. And so the final season was like a month ago, and it's similar for people that watch like your good drug cartel show.
Like
it's like
The Wire.
Kind of not as good as The Wire. The Wire is excellent, but it's like.
See, and so here's our difference. I can't watch The Wire because it's just too emotional. I have just too much emotional investment
dark
for me.
It's very dark.
I don't need that in my life. I just like, give me Star Trek, give me Star Wars, give me all the candy.
That's a little bit because like that type of the sci-fi, like it's not reality, right? So you're not as emotionally invested. Yeah, exactly. The Wires is pretty heavy. Top Boy's like a Power meets Snowfall, but like in London. Oh. Great show, love it. So that's probably the last thing I binged, and then I will say I have to very much limit the amount of soccer I watch because since I work in it, I don't want to get tired of it. So I will always watch Angel City. I'll watch some of the big games. I'll limit how much. I'll always support, but I just have to limit my intake, especially when it's your livelihood. So, but most of the time, like sometimes I just sit in silence like a weirdo.
Stop being all balanced, like being a balanced human being. What's up with that?
In silence. I think because I just get
weirdo. That might be in the promo. I might put that in the promo. Sometimes it sounds like a weirdo. Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I just am like so overstimulated that TV or music is too much. So I'll just sit and like scroll on my phone. But I do actually watch a lot of TV. It's just I've been traveling so much lately that I haven't seen anything. But big Top Boy fan. I would recommend that to anyone who's into that stuff.
Awesome. Well, that's great. Yeah. Let's see. For me these days, I've been pitching Second Look, but the Michael Jackson podcast.
Okay.
So Jay Smooth is a DJ from New York. I've talked about this before on the show, but it's so good at dissecting Michael Jackson and kind of this.
Okay.
And basically say, how do you hold the music and the person and all the allegations and all of that
separate?
And I think they do a really excellent job of giving foundation to the cultural impact of Michael Jackson and the Jackson 5 and the Jacksons, as well as the realities of the allegations and everything that's going on to let you land in a place that you have to like decide where you. It's just so well done.
I like that.
I've been pushing that for everybody to kind of listen to. It's just really well done. And then the other one, I listen to. I read, but I read through my ears. So I do a lot of audiobooks, and I'm listening to Yellowface right now, which is really, really good. If you need just something, it's about this white author who had an Asian best friend. And this is not a spoiler. She dies early in the book, and then she takes the book that the Asian was writing and kind of takes it as her own, and the implications for a white author telling an Asian story. It's so good.
Okay.
So well done. I think it's the best. I don't know. But yeah, it's called Yellowface, which is excellent what I'm reading. And then I peek over because both my kids are super academic, but they love trash. So like Love Island is on our TV whenever somebody's visiting.
I figured.
And I'm like, I was like, this, what are we, what's going on? 2 hours later.
But then you love
it.
it.
Yeah, I'm like 2 hours later, I'm like, oh, I hate her. Like, how could he? She's my favorite. He's terrible. Like,
it has that effect.
It's insidious. It is That's exactly.
I used to watch a lot of Love Island, but then after a while, I was like, "Oh my god, this is like it's like triggering." Just sometimes like that drama is like too triggering, where you're like, "Oh my god, my head hurts." And then other times, when you really want to escape reality, it's just the best thing on TV.
Oh yeah,
I'm in those moods right now where I'm like, no.
We watched the English. I guess it's the English British one too, which makes it more fun because accents are more fun. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much for being on. It was great to get to know you. We're going to see your face and voice and all that. Are you working with the Soul in the future? Is that going to be part of what you're doing?
Hopefully, Soul, if you're listening, you have my number. I would love to. But no, thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
Yeah, good. Thank you for being here. All right, everybody. Again, this was the last episode of Filipino American History Month, though maybe we're going to have you back on at some point when you're big and famous. I'm going to be like, do you remember you were on this small little podcast years ago? And I made you talk about your existential crisis about Filipino. Do you remember that?
I remember it. So I'll be there.
So all right. So for those of you that have been following, make sure you go and listen to the rest of the episodes from this month. But do all your podcasting, subscribe, all the things you do when you're at the podcast stuff. And again, we'll see you next week on BRC and Friends. BRC and Friends was hosted and produced by Bruce Reyes-Chow. Co-hosts were Jorge Bautista, Mickey Scott Bay Jones, Amy Kim Caramus Parks, and Laura Monaco Heifetz. And the theme music was composed and recorded by Marissa Magdal Laurent. Feel free to connect with any of us via the show notes. And lastly, please don't make me beg. Take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe to BRC and Friends wherever you listen to podcasts. Until the next episode, thanks for listening to BRC and Friends.